We actually do not really know a lot about how people in West Africa, or particularly Senegal, communicate among each other.
How is disinformation strategically played out in order to fuel conflicts?
If you look at Burkina Faso, at Mali, this is exactly what happens. People can't trust anymore what people say.
When you think about conflict communication, how in the Senegal, for instance, hate speech, disinformation and rumors are working.
You have to start to prevent any eroding of these communication lines before the conflict is really increasing and exploding.
Security forces have clashed with protesters in Burkina Faso's capital, Ouagadougou.
Human communication is complex and can be confusing. To be effective, a narrative is needed to make sense. Religious and traditional leaders are important actors and influencers who shape the narratives of development and conflict.
Often in conflict resolution, communication, even very low-level interpersonal communication is underestimated. We very often focus on policing, military intervention, on institutional changes, and underestimate how strongly conflict parties rely on feelings, on perceptions of their constituencies. That is a very important aspect that I, as a communication scholar, would emphasize much more than it is done in current approaches to conflict resolution.
Communication was essential in destabilizing Mali or Burkina Faso. So it's traveling information basically, which is transnational. It crosses borders. We are trying to find out where these streams of information are coming from and whether that affects the reality on the ground.
The source of a conflict is communication. Normally, if you look at researchers and also studies, they are just, I don't want to say ignore, but somehow fade out this main topic, communication.
What role do, for example, play religious leaders like imams, bishops, or regional leaders like local kings, or youth or women's groups in communication networks?
Throughout West Africa, religious and traditional leaders play an important role for social cohesion and peace between various ethnic or religious groups. Together with other stakeholders from government and civil society, they influence the framework for development. How they communicate among each other and with the public is critical for the future.
This is the reason why we are here, and this is why we get a very positive feedback from everybody we have talked to until now. Communication is key.
If an artist's role is to function as a bellwether on contemporary discussion, a visit to the workshop of the Shepherd of Ile de Ngor is a good place to look. The island north of Dakar houses an artist who feels Senegal's temperature. Our team is meeting visual artist, faithful Muslim and telecommunications engineer Abdoulaye Diallo.
Mais c'est évident, c'est le marché. Aujourd'hui, en fait, la nouvelle religion, c'est la loi du marché. C'est la nouvelle religion. C'est la compétition, la nouvelle religion. Il faut que je sois le plus fort, il faut que je sois le premier. Mais ce qui installe le monde dans cette jungle dont nous ne sortirons jamais. Il se passe des choses au Mali. C'est parce que, encore une fois, la zone la plus aurifère au monde, c'est pas autre chose. Vous savez, l'agression invite l'agression, le bien invite le bien. Si ceux qui sont plus forts avait invité les autres dans le bien, il n'y aurait pas eu de problème.
The raw material interests of Europe and Asia collide with the interests of African raw material suppliers. This imbalance brews conflict along ethnic or religious lines, amplified by hate speech and disinformation. Martin Emmer researches how disinformation threatens social cohesion.
We want to understand what role does traditional media and these new digital mobile media play in the emergence of conflicts, how interested parties like insurgent groups, like foreign governments are trying to use these communication channels to increase conflict in a certain region like here.
Nous demandons à la France de dégager, de partir, de nous laisser en paix.
Senegal is a bustling, multicultural and predominantly Muslim society with relatively small Christian and animist minorities. They have a traditionally good relationship with one another. Hate speech and disinformation can threaten this relationship.
Some actors, they understand perfectly that if you are destroying trust by spreading rumors, disinformation, people are not trusting anymore these grown-up sources of information.
What are the sources of information? Who can be trusted? How is information being disseminated within society and by which means? We need empirical data to find solutions.
Empirical data, it gives us the opportunity, first of all, to understand what are the facts. It's not just a hunch or stomach feeling that we rely on, but a scientific foundation to all what we want to do.
Prevention needs a proper research. If you don't understand how communication works, especially in the African context, you are not able to come up with proper measures against these eroding attacks, communicating attacks against the social cohesion.
When we try to understand social conflicts, for example, and the role media and communication plays in it, we want to see in detail what media people use, how they include information from the media in their interaction with others, to better assess what's the root of a conflict and probably what may be starting points for conflict resolution.
Sufi Islam as well as Christianity can be bridge builders to other stakeholders and are essential for conflict resolution. Abdoulaye Diallo explains what role Sufi Islam could play.
Qu'est-ce que c'est que le soufisme? C'est tout simplement savoir comment vivre une certaine proximité avec ses semblables. C'est ça le soufisme. C'est recevoir de vous et vous transmettre, vivre une société d'entraide. C'est faire de sorte que vous vous sentiez mon frère, que vous soyez chrétien, que vous soyez juif, que vous soyez pas croyant du tout. Quand nos regards se posent, il faut que je puisse ressentir ce qui sort de votre cœur. Qu'on vive ensemble une société d'entraide.
We're on our way to Joual Fadiout. The community has a strong history of organizing women and local fishermen. It is also the birthplace of Senegal's first president, Léopold Sédar Senghor, who was a Christian. Intermarriages between Muslims and Christians are common in Joual. How does a community like Joual see recent developments in social media use? How are they affected by disinformation and hate speech? And what are possible solutions to their problems? It's tradition to offer libation to arriving guests and a way of giving homage to the ancestors. Ancestors are not only respected in African cultures, but also invited to participate in all public functions.
What we try to do here is to be very transparent in what our concepts are and to explain how the scientific methodology on which everything rests is actually working.
The women of Joual want to find their own voice to express their needs. Their stories can act as counter-narratives to hate or disinformation. His Excellency the Catholic Bishop of Thiès, André Gay, emphasizes the role of religion.
La religion joue un rôle fondamental dans la société, fondamental. Et je suis chargé des relations avec l'islam. Voilà, je suis responsable de la commission qui traite des questions des relations avec l'islam. Parce que nous sommes dans une zone où l'islam est très fort, mais très ouvert.
In order to improve communication with the Muslim majority and with Christian communities, the Diocese of Thiès wants to invest in a radio program.
Nous utilisons beaucoup la radio aussi parce que nous sommes une population de tradition orale également. Donc, il y a les sites, les réseaux sociaux, mais il y a aussi la radio parce que beaucoup de gens écoutent la radio. Et c'est important pour les personnes qui ne peuvent pas ou qui n'ont pas de connexion ou qui n'ont pas de téléphone, peut-être. Mais je le dis aussi, le message que moi je porte et que je sens inspiré de ma conviction de foi qu'il faut construire la fraternité et la paix qui sont la base du développement.
Guided interviews with many different stakeholders provide context to difficult questions and enable solutions.
We just set up a guideline with a list of questions we were interested in, questions that, to our expectations, produce the data that help us better understand the situation we are interested in. That's the idea of a guided interview.
We will talk with many different stakeholders who provide many different perspectives to get a rich and contextualized picture of the information landscape of Senegal and other West African countries. Rural communities, as well as city dwellers, farmers, fishermen or youth groups, along with academic experts, will partner with us. Talking with government and non-governmental civil society, each individual interview will act as a sensor point of information. This scientific data will allow us the identification of disinformation and the mapping of harmful information flows.
We need to identify, are there connections between different data and different effects. This is something we will explore during our journey. We don't know it yet. Therefore, we have chosen and still identifying other partners, academic partners, but also partners on practical level, to understand better and to find out where are the correlations. And for sure, it will be more interesting also to see how is communication affecting maybe human trafficking or organized crime or activities of terrorist groups, because communication is key.
Combining all of these data, you can build very, very rich information-dense maps of what's going on in the region, and adding communication to it, so understanding what issues are emerging in a certain region and connecting this information to these other data, to these conflict data, for example, can give us a much deeper insight in what's going on here, and even may help us much better to understand the reasons of conflict and also approaches to solve these conflicts.
Science-based narrative management is a tool for conflict prevention.
We try to enable various different stakeholders to come up with communication concepts, and be it citizen journalists, that could be a women's group who's trying to find their own voice to communicate about their women issues, youth groups the same, sporting groups, but also, and not to forget, the police or the armed forces. How are they communicating to the populace at large?
Not only cultures but also languages are a special challenge here in the region. So we need to talk to people in their own languages, and that means a lot of additional effort. So having interpreters with us that understand cultures, understand contexts, to interpret our questions in the right way, that is a task we have to fulfill, and we invest a lot of effort in doing so to make sure that we get reliable and valid data.
Religious and traditional leaders, together with various stakeholders from government, security forces or civil society, can help facilitate addressing the pressing security questions of our modern times. Without security, development will not be possible. Abdoulaye Diallo, the shepherd of Île de Ngor, thinks we owe this common effort to our children.
C'était pas un problème du musulman ou du chrétien ou du juif ou de l'athée. Qu'est-ce que nous voulons laisser à nos enfants demain? Est-ce que nous avons le droit de leur laisser payer le coût de nos turpitudes? Est-ce que nous avons le droit de leur dire qu'on se fout de vous? On casse la terre, on extrait tout, on fait tout, on vous laisse rien. Est-ce qu'on a le droit? Est-ce qu'on a le droit? Est-ce qu'on a le droit?
Our children are our future. For them to prosper, we need peace, not hate.
If we know who are the stakeholders, what their problems are, where the conflict lines are, we can use that information to collectively develop solutions to the various problems. And that is going to be used in the training process.
Elito si sama ya wula, elito si sama ya wula, ya fama don